I was able to speak with the head of the Missing Child Unit at the U.S. Marshals, and I was able to communicate directly with the CDC about that statistic that was causing so much confusion related to COVID-19 deaths. I can't wait to share this update with you. And let me tell you, entrepreneurship can be really hard, but then every once in a while you have those days where people return your call. And it feels so good, and it's really a credit to you and the community that you're building, that people are really paying attention to you as an audience. So congratulations and thank you for your support, because this could not happen without you, and I really appreciate it. Let's talk a little bit about what I learned from the U.S. Marshals. Darby Kirby is the head of the Missing Child Unit at the U.S. Marshals. We had a phone conversation just yesterday, sort of covering a lot of different topics right now. What you should know is that the U.S. Marshals are involved in several investigations that are ongoing, trying to locate missing children around the United States. Big thing to know overall is that the U.S. Marshals only get involved with missing child cases when there's an elevated risk factor. And that can mean a lot of different things. That can mean that a child needs to be on medication and they don't have the medication. So that's an elevated risk factor. Or it can mean that a child is with someone who's really dangerous, that could be armed, and that's an elevated risk factor. But when you see U.S. Marshals related to missing children, you know that means there's an elevated risk factor. Here's something else you should know. More than 90% of the missing children in America are runaways. And I know many of us probably have an image of a missing child in our mind as someone that is abducted off the street. Certainly can still happen and still does, but the majority of cases are runaways. So what determines when the U.S. Marshals rescue a missing child or safely locate them? That was one of the questions I had as I read about Operation Not Forgotten, this investigation that took place in Georgia, where there were 39 missing children that the U.S. Marshals were able to rescue or safely locate. Darby was able to clear that up for me. So if a child runs away, sometimes before an investigation concludes, that child returns home. Then it's up to the U.S. Marshals to confirm they're actually where they should be with who they're supposed to be with. And when they do, the U.S. Marshals say that child has been safely located. For the other children, they are indeed rescued. And this was a sobering fact to learn. I can confirm to you that of the 26 children that were rescued in Georgia, 15 of them were victims of child trafficking. And this is unfortunately a very sobering reality for runaways, and something that Darby and I talked quite a bit about. I'm working on another interview for you on the record so you can really hear from an expert on this field. This conversation with Darby was on the record, but we were kind of getting to know each other, and I was gathering some of these key facts for you. What you should also know is that the U.S. Marshals not only are involved in this investigation that we heard about, Operation Not Forgotten in Georgia, they're also involved in an ongoing investigation or operation in Ohio called Operation Safety Net, and there are others happening at this time. If you look at Ohio and Georgia together so far, the U.S. Marshals with their partners were able to rescue or locate more than 50 children. So just want to share this with you. I know it's very easy to feel very cynical right now about government, about all sorts of things, right? But about government specifically, and sometimes there's good reason for that. I walked away from this conversation with Darby with a very powerful reminder that's also a fact, that there are many people that are working on behalf of the U.S. government to do really tough things, and we can't forget that they're a part of the picture too. So I just wanted to share that with you. All right, let's talk a little bit about the CDC and communication with the CDC about COVID-19. I am sitting on the floor for a reason. It's actually because I have my super high-tech whiteboard that I want to show you in just a second, but here's a quick review. Over the weekend, there was a lot of conversation on social media about some statistics about COVID-19 deaths that appeared to show that COVID-19 was the only cause of death for a very small portion of the COVID-19 deaths in America. We were able to clear that up going into the week, but I have a little bit more information. Of the COVID-19 deaths that the CDC knows about right now, in 92% of all of those deaths, COVID-19 was the underlying cause, was like the primary underlying cause that led to the domino effect that unfortunately led to someone's passing. In 8% of the cases, COVID-19 may not be the primary underlying cause, but it may be a factor in the death, and it was listed as such. So overall, any of the deaths that the CDC was counting, COVID-19 was either the primary underlying cause or a factor in someone's death. And this comes to the question of, how does someone die from COVID or with COVID? So in 92% of the cases, what the CDC is saying is that the person died from COVID, and in about 8% of the cases, the person died with COVID. I want to show you what this looks like, so stand by. All right, guys, here's the handy dandy whiteboard. Here is a portrait my children did of me, and you can see that research and motherhood are sharing the same space in my house. As I'm sure for many of you, this is very similar. So let me just show you what I mean about dying from COVID or with COVID. So right now what the CDC is saying is that 92% of all COVID deaths go something like this. Someone has COVID. They may, for example, have heart disease, and COVID leads to respiratory failure and then leads to death. So that could be one pathway. The heart disease is listed as potentially a factor, but the main driver is COVID-19, and the main cause of death is something that COVID-19 caused. You can see, and I'm just listing a couple of these pre-existing conditions and a few of these causes, how many potential combinations there can be. And this is how the CDC, unfortunately, is recording things right now. A lot of this is all mixed together in one pot. So, for example, you could have someone that has diabetes and obesity, develops pneumonia, and this is their pathway. So again, COVID-19 is the primary driver. They could have these other conditions. They have this eventual cause of death that was caused by COVID, and this is their pathway. But these, all sorts of combinations can happen. In the other 8% that we're missing here, what they're saying essentially is that COVID might be here. And I'm just going to write it as best I can. So someone, let's say has cancer, unfortunately, has been really sick, and they got COVID-19, and unfortunately they died. The primary driver of their death was cancer, but COVID-19 was also a factor. So it might be listed on their death certificate. Either way, 100% of COVID-19 deaths in America have COVID-19 either as the main driver or one of the factors in it. Now, the 6% that everyone was talking about gets a little confusing. Some were saying, well, there's only 6% where COVID-19 was the cause for death. There was only one cause, and it was COVID-19. What essentially that was saying, in only 6% of the cases, there were no other conditions or causes listed. It was just COVID-19, and that's just very rare in general. I hope that was helpful to you. Quick story to have your eye on related to COVID-19. We recently learned that the US government purchased 150 million rapid COVID-19 tests. What we also just learned in the last 24 hours is as these tests are going to be distributed to different states, it is the intention of these states to use these tests to screen students in K through 12 schools. I don't have any details on the screening, but this is the first that we're learning that these tests might be used in that way. We've previously thought that these tests would be used at nursing homes or for doctors or nurses that are really working on the front lines. The tests will still be used for that, but also for screening students. What you should know about these tests is that they're about the size of a credit card. You still need someone to administer them. It's still a nasal swab, but you get the results in 15 minutes. How accurate are these tests is another question entirely. Some believe these tests are less accurate than a test that you would send to a laboratory. But here's the question and some context I have on this particular issue. What is a reasonable expectation for us for COVID-19 testing accuracy in America? This is why I'm asking this question. When you get tested for the flu, a doctor might tell you have to get tested for the flu within the first 2 days of your symptoms to get an accurate, rapid result. Well, should we have that same expectation for COVID-19, or are we actually having higher expectations for the new coronavirus? I think having an idea of what's reasonable would be really helpful for this conversation. So it's something I'm going to be looking more into. In the meantime, all this information along with developing stories is on our website on smarternews.com. I'm curious what you think. What is reasonable for us? What's really reasonable? Not ideal, but reasonable right now, less than 9 months into this pandemic in America. All right, guys, More@inspirenews.com, and questions and comments, always let me know. And thank you so much for your support. Have a great day.